It was supposed to be just another family trip. Evander's twin daughters, Amiyah and Seraya, were buzzing with excitement, tiny suitcases in tow, their laughter echoing through the busy airport terminal. But in a moment, everything changed. At the gate, Caleste, a stern airline staff member, stepped in. Her eyes lingered on the girls, a hesitation that made Evander's stomach twist. Then came the words no parent ever wants to hear. They can't board. Shock froze Evander in place. His daughters' faces, full of confusion and hurt, stared back at him. The bustling terminal around them faded into silence, every eye drawn to the unfolding tension. Questions swirled. Why were they being stopped? What had they done wrong? In that instant, Evander knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was something bigger, something unfair, and he couldn't just stand by. What happened next would shake the airport to its core and change the course of their lives forever. How far would a father go to protect his daughters and make sure the world knew they would never be treated this way? The airport buzzed around them like a hive of endless movement, announcements crackling over the loudspeakers, wheels of luggage rolling across polished floors, travelers rushing past in hurried waves. But for Evander, the world had narrowed down to a single, unbearable moment. His daughters, Amiyah and Seraya, clutched each other's hands, their tiny faces bright with anticipation, sparkling eyes filled with dreams of airplanes and adventure. Evander's heart swelled watching them. He had always promised them the world, and today he had. Tickets booked on a flight that should have been smooth, simple, filled with laughter. Then Caleste appeared. At first, she seemed like any other gate staff, efficient, professional, almost invisible amid the chaos. But when her eyes landed on Amiyah and Seraya, something changed. The warmth in their smiles faltered under the cold scrutiny she directed at them. "Excuse me," Caleste said, her voice flat, clinical. "They can't board this flight." Evander froze. The words struck like a sudden sharp crack of thunder. His daughters blinked up at him, confusion blossoming into fear. "What? Why?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge that masked the surge of anger rising inside him. Caleste didn't flinch. "I'm sorry. It's the airline's policy." The words were meaningless. Evander knew it. He had flown countless times, managed complex negotiations, encountered endless regulations, but nothing justified this. Nothing, except perhaps the unspoken prejudice in her tone, the way her gaze lingered a second too long on the twins' dark skin. Amiyah's small hand trembled in her sister's. Seraya's eyes darted to their father, silently pleading for protection. Evander felt the familiar tightening in his chest, that inescapable mixture of rage and helplessness. And yet in that moment he did nothing but watch. A line began to form behind them, other passengers muttering under their breaths, throwing curious or disapproving glances. Some snapped photos discreetly, the scene becoming an unintentional spectacle. The twins' humiliation was laid bare before strangers, a private agony turned public theater. Caleste's voice cut through the rising murmurs. "If you can't comply, you'll need to leave the gate area." Her words were sharp, final. Evander stepped forward, heart pounding like a drum. "This is unacceptable," he said, calm but ice beneath the surface. "Explain exactly why my daughters are not allowed to board." Her gaze flicked briefly to his suit, the subtle cues of power and wealth evident in his posture, the quiet authority in his tone. She hesitated just for a heartbeat before masking it with the same professional detachment. "It's the airline's policy," she repeated. Evander felt something snap, not just anger, but a deep, consuming determination. The twins' small faces, their bright hopes dimming before his eyes, ignited a fire he could not contain. He could not, would not, let this injustice slide. And yet, as he opened his mouth to demand further explanation, another announcement blared from the speakers, drowning out the last vestige of calm. A delayed flight, a minor inconvenience for some, but for Evander, it was a jarring reminder. The world would always find ways to move forward, even when it trampled over fairness and humanity. He took a deep breath. The terminal felt suddenly oppressive. every passing glance a silent accusation, every whisper a tiny hammer against his patience. And in that tension-filled silence, Evander knew one thing with crystal clarity. This moment would not end quietly. Not now, not ever, because some fights demanded to be seen. Some wrongs demanded to be confronted. And Evander was ready? The terminal had grown tense, almost electric, the air thick with whispers and uneasy glances. Every step Evander took felt heavier, each heartbeat a drum counting down to confrontation. Amiyah and Seraya clung to him, their tiny hands trembling, trying to make sense of the cruel, inexplicable barrier Caleste had placed between them and the world beyond the gate. Evander's eyes burned, not just with anger, but with sorrow and disbelief. He had faced adversity in boardrooms, in negotiations, even in courtrooms. He had handled hostile investors, political pushback, and corporate betrayals. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare him for the sting of seeing his own daughters turned away, their innocence marked by someone else's bias. Caleste remained unmoved, standing like a statue of authority, her posture perfect, her voice cold, calculated. "Sir, I've explained. They cannot board this flight. You will need to leave the gate area if you cannot comply." Evander's jaw clenched. A life of patience and strategic thinking had led him here, but patience had its limits. And this blatant, humiliating injustice had pushed him to the edge. He could feel the air shifting around them. Other passengers were noticing, some snapping pictures, some whispering furiously. The twins' embarrassment was now public, magnified in the glaring, fluorescent lights of the terminal. Amiyah's eyes welled up with tears. Seraya's small voice trembled. "Daddy, why won't she let us go?" Evander knelt, taking both of them into his arms. His voice was steady but carried a force that seemed to vibrate through the crowd. "I don't know why she thinks this is fair," he said, looking them in the eye. "But I promise you, I will fix this. Nobody gets to treat you like this." A low murmur ran through the crowd, like a wave of tension rippling through still water. Passengers who had initially avoided the drama now turned to watch. Phones were raised. Cameras clicked. Some filmed. Some whispered. Every eye in the terminal was focused on Evander and his daughters, the impossible injustice now unmistakably visible. Caleste's lips pressed into a thin line. Authority was slipping from her control. "Sir, if you continue to escalate," Evander stood, towering not just in stature but in presence. His voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and unwavering. "No, you will not speak to my daughters that way. You will not humiliate them in front of strangers. This ends now." The words were like lightning. Passengers stopped walking. Airport staff paused mid-task, and even security officers paused, sensing the tension crackling in the air. Evander's calm authority, combined with the righteous fury in his voice, made the situation impossible to ignore. Caleste's composure finally faltered. Her eyes flicked to the crowd, then to Evander, realizing that the private decision she had wielded as power was now a public spectacle. "Sir, you can't just—" Evander didn't wait for her to finish. His phone was in hand before anyone realized what he was doing. In seconds, a message went out, internal, direct, unmistakable. Every flight under the airline's operation was halted. Not a single plane could move until this was resolved. The hum of engines, the mechanical rhythm of takeoffs and landings, abruptly frozen. Gasps filled the terminal. The passengers shifted, disbelief painted on every face. Murmurs escalated into a low roar. People looked at Evander not as a man, not as a CEO, but as a father who refused to let his children be wronged. His presence, calm yet unyielding, had shifted the power. Caleste's face turned pale. Her carefully maintained authority crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Evander's hand rested gently on Amiyah's shoulder, then Seraya's, shielding them from the unfolding chaos. "You will answer," he said softly, but the power behind the words was unmistakable. Security moved closer, uncertain, wary. Employees whispered among themselves, some realizing the magnitude of what had just happened. Passengers recorded, posted, shared. Social media would explode in minutes. What had been a private humiliation was now an undeniable injustice laid bare. The twins clung tighter to Evander, still frightened, still hurt, but there was also a glimmer of hope in their eyes. The realization that their father was their shield. They had been targeted by systemic prejudice, but he had turned the tables, transforming fear into action. Caleste's voice finally broke, shaky and defensive. "Sir, you can't, this isn't—" "Protocol!" Evander stepped closer, his calm fury like a tide ready to sweep everything away. "Protocol?" he echoed. "Protocol doesn't allow you to decide who deserves to travel based on the color of their skin. Not when my daughters are involved, not ever." The terminal was silent, except for the soft cries of Amiyah and Seraya and the occasional shuffle of stunned passengers. Time seemed to stretch, every heartbeat magnified, every second suspended like a held breath. Evander took a deep breath, surveying the sea of onlookers, feeling their collective tension and attention. And then, in a quiet voice meant only for the twins, he said, "You see this? This is why we never stay silent. Because standing up, even when it's scary, changes everything." But even as he spoke, there was a new looming tension, a sense that this confrontation was far from over. Caleste's lips twitched with defiance, and he could feel the eyes of higher management on him, unseen, yet palpably threatening. The battle had reached its peak, the most intense emotional moment of their journey. And yet, the resolution, the ultimate reckoning, was still out of reach. Evander looked down at Amiyah and Seraya, their small hands trembling but trusting. His eyes hardened. The fight was not just theirs. It was for every child, every family who had ever faced humiliation, prejudice, or injustice. And he would not back down, because some wrongs demanded courage. Some injustices demanded confrontation. And in that terminal, under the unblinking fluorescent lights, Evander made a choice that would be remembered long after the engines roared back to life. The question now lingered in the charged air. Would justice be served, or had this act of courage ignited a storm bigger than even Evander could control? The terminal, once buzzing with the chaotic rhythm of travel, now felt strangely suspended in time. Conversations had quieted into murmurs, the occasional click of a phone camera the only sound breaking the tense silence. Evander stood with Amiyah and Seraya still clinging to him, their tiny bodies trembling, but not from fear alone. A spark of hope glimmered in their eyes, fragile but real, like sunlight through a storm. Evander surveyed the room, taking in the passengers, airport staff, and security officers who had witnessed the confrontation. Their faces bore expressions ranging from awe to disbelief, some nodding subtly, others whispering to each other, their phones recording every moment. What had started as a private humiliation had become a public reckoning, a stark reminder that injustice could not hide when confronted with courage. Caleste remained frozen near the gate, her professional mask fractured, revealing the unease beneath. Higher management had arrived quietly but swiftly, their faces a mixture of irritation, panic, and reluctant respect. Evander's decision to halt every flight had sent shockwaves through the system. Not one plane could take off until this matter was addressed. The ripple effect of a single father's courage had grown beyond anyone's anticipation. Evander crouched again to meet his daughter's eyes. "You see, girls," he said softly, "sometimes the world isn't fair. But when we stand up, even when it's scary, we change it, one step at a time." Amiyah and Seraya clung tighter, their tears beginning to ebb, replaced with a tentative sense of empowerment. They had been wronged, yes, but they were not powerless. A representative from the airline finally approached, hesitant and carefully measured. "Mr. Evander, we understand the situation now," the man stammered. "The decision to deny boarding was inappropriate. We apologize for the distress caused to your daughters and to you. We will ensure all procedures are reviewed immediately." Evander's eyes, sharp and unwavering, did not soften. "Apologies are words," he said firmly. "Actions are what matter. I want these policies corrected, and I want assurance this will never happen again to any child. Not here. Not anywhere." The airline officials nodded, realizing that this confrontation had exposed a systemic flaw, a prejudice that could no longer be ignored. Social media was already ablaze with footage of the incident, hashtags spreading rapidly. "Stand with Evander," "Justice for Amiyah and Seraya," "No to racism." Public pressure mounted in real time, and the company had no choice but to respond decisively. The twins, still holding their father's hands, looked up at him. "Daddy, did we win?" Amiyah asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Evander smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We made them listen," he said. "That's the first step. Courage always matters, no matter what anyone else says." As the minutes stretched into hours, Evander coordinated with airline representatives to ensure that Amiyah and Seraya could board safely, escorted personally by staff who had witnessed the earlier tension. It was a small victory, but a monumental one for the twins. They stepped onto the plane, not as victims, but as witnesses to the power of speaking up, their heads held high, their father's presence unwavering. Outside the terminal, the story had spread like wildfire. Local news outlets, online media platforms, and social channels all carried the footage and Evander's firm stance. Interviews were requested, statements were made. The airline's CEO issued a formal apology publicly, acknowledging the incident and promising systemic change. Training programs for staff on racial sensitivity and inclusivity were implemented within days. Evander's singular act of courage had sparked a movement within the company and beyond. At home later that evening, Evander tucked the twins into bed. Amiyah whispered, "Daddy, will people always be mean like that?" Seraya added softly, "Will it happen again?" Evander held them close, feeling the weight of their innocence juxtaposed with the harshness of the world. "Not always," he said, voice steady but warm. "But there will be people who are unfair. That's why we have to stand up, to speak, to protect each other. Courage can change even the hardest hearts." In the days that followed, Evander received countless messages from families who had faced similar humiliation and prejudice. Parents shared stories of discrimination at schools, in airports, even in neighborhoods. Some were too afraid to speak up. Some had tried and failed. But Evander's stand inspired them, showing that one person's courage could ripple outward, creating a network of resistance against injustice. The twins returned to school a week later. Their classmates, unaware of the viral storm, simply saw two girls who had faced adversity and emerged resilient. For Amiyah and Seraya, the experience left a lasting impression, a lesson not just about fear and frustration, but about standing tall, demanding fairness, and refusing to be silenced. Evander reflected on the incident in the quiet of his study, reviewing the footage, the statements, and the growing media coverage. Racism, he realized, wasn't just about isolated acts. It was a system, a pattern that seeped into institutions, communities, and minds. But it could be confronted, challenged, and dismantled when people refused to remain silent. He thought of Caleste, not with hatred, but with a measured understanding. She represented a system that had failed, one that could be changed with accountability, education, and courage. Her actions were a symptom, not the disease itself. And by holding her and the airline accountable, he had not only defended his daughters, but also set a precedent that others could follow. The moral became clear. Racism destroys families. Prejudice weakens communities, and silence perpetuates injustice. Unity, courage, and unwavering action bring healing, change, and hope. Evander's act was more than a personal victory. It was a beacon. A reminder that even a single voice, guided by integrity and love, could challenge the deepest wrongs and ignite a movement toward justice. As the sun set outside, casting a warm golden glow through the large windows of their home, Evander tucked the twins in once more. Amiyah's hand found his. Seraya's small head rested against his shoulder. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "No one will define your worth. Not ever. We rise together, always." The world outside remained imperfect, full of challenges and prejudices yet to be faced. But in that quiet moment within the walls of their home, a lesson had been etched into the hearts of two young girls and their father. Courage, unity, and love could defy even the harshest injustices. Evander looked out the window one last time. The city lights twinkling like distant stars. A storm had passed in the terminal, but its ripples would continue far beyond that day. The fight against injustice would never truly end, but the victory lay in standing tall, speaking up and refusing to back down, and in that defiance, the world changed. Not entirely, not overnight, but enough to remind everyone watching that courage always matters.